Bobby, if you want to share that first slide, what we would love to do is kick it off by talking about each of their companies and what they do exactly. And then we're going to dive into that layered approach, like I was talking about before. So, first, we're going to have Bobby talk a little bit about Axiom and what his company does, so you guys know a little bit of their background.
Okay. Thank you, Kaylee. So Axiom's been around for 20 years as well. I was started in the industry doing lots of other software type things, but Axiom was started about 20 years ago. And our focus has really been on providing a layered approach of security and protection and support to our clients. I think Kaylee will probably touch base a little bit on this, but I'll emphasize it that this presentation isn't really going to be on a sales perspective. It's going to be more from just talking about specific holes and needs that need to be filled. And so that's kind of what I will be discussing is some of the areas that we feel are critical for your business to operate correctly. What we're going to be presenting is really the minimum bar that we feel organizations should be operating at. Kaylee?
Yeah, that's awesome. And just like Bobby said, this is not a sales pitch about their company specifically, but to tell you how important that layered approach is, and not just one thing is going to cut it. Like, you can't just say that you have a firewall and that's going to be okay. Sometimes you're going to need a lot more than that. So, having those different layers is really important. And that's why Bobby and Chris are both here to explain to you those really specific layers that you can integrate into your company so that you feel prepared. So, yeah. And now I would love to hear a little bit about the Holmes organization, Chris.
Yes, thank you, Keely. You actually had a great segue as far as it's not just one approach and one thing that you can do. That's the beauty of the Holmes organization. You know, we're an independent insurance agency. We're family owned, been in business here over 30 years. So we got you by 20, Bobby. But being an independent allows us to access almost the entire insurance marketplace. We have dozens and dozens of companies that we can customize things and share, really put together a customized program. And cyber is a great example of a coverage that's ever changing. It needs customization. So being independent, really, we can, pass that value on to the customer. And we're definitely not cookie cutter. And our approach today is, showing insurance can get very dull sometimes. So I want to show you some real life examples and some actual claims to, what can happen, what type of policies can respond. So my approach today is hopefully give you some examples that you can, stories that you can, will hit home and you can relate to. So.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, Chris, I did not expect how much connectivity and synergy between the two organizations. As after when we were preparing, it's amazing how many times with cybersecurity and breaches and those types of things, this insurance connectivity is really important. So it cannot be understated.
Definitely. Yep.
All right, so let's get started. Bobby is going to kick it off with a few slides about what he believes is the best integrated layer approach to security. So if you switch over to the next slide, we will get started.
Well, great. Thanks, Kaylee. So kind of like we were talking before, a layered approach is really the best solution. And if you see in this chart, it talks about how breaches and other things of that nature have been increasing over the years. And that's not by accident. That's on purpose by active threats, and they're called bad actors or hackers. There's lots of different terms that you can use for that, but they are very good at what they do, and they're making considerable amount of money doing it. They are contributing to so many negative taglines on the internet, things like that. So, and the reason why that is because many companies aren't following the things that we're going to outline today. So I highly suggest pay attention, take some notes. The things that we're going to be talking about are the holes that we perceive that must be filled in order for your organization to function in a safe manner. So the way that I say that is if you all have cars, I'm assuming, right? And let's all say that you decided to drive 100 miles an hour everywhere you wanted to go. Your mileage may vary as far as in how far and how long you'll be able to go before you get a ticket, but you will eventually get a ticket. Wouldn't that be true, Kaylee?
Most likely, yes.
Right? I mean, so there's a good chance you're going to get a ticket. So just because you've had success doing that methodology over the course of years and not getting a ticket does not mean that it's a sound approach. Okay. And so just because you've operated your business without having these layers in place does not constitute that what you're doing is right. Everything that I'm going to be sharing with you is an industry standard across many different security providers. Other organizations have all identified the things that we're going to be talking about today. Now, I'm not going to specifically go into the different products that you can utilize to fill those holes. That's up to you or the provider or whoever it is that you have that's providing your security protection, whether you have someone in your organization, whether you're partnering with an organization like ourselves. These things must be provided for you in order for you to operate safely. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's get into it a little bit. So one of the things that we feel is really important to this is a layered approach. There's no magic bullet that's going to kill everything. So we're going to talk about what those layers are and what they look like. So if you look at the screen here, we have some of the basic things outlined in here, like enterprise antivirus, patching, third-party updates, content filtering, intrusion detection, and then also sometimes neglected by a lot of organizations, the cyber insurance aspect. So you really hope you never have to fall back on it, but that cyber insurance is really important to have because when those scenarios do happen, if it does happen, you don't want to find out that you don't have the wrong cyber insurance because that's the wrong time to know.
Definitely. If it happens, now what? You want to have that now what solution.
Right. And it's like backups too, right? I mean, you don't want to know your backups aren't great when you're needing to do a restoration. So we want to just provide this presentation to you guys so that you will be able to have a better understanding. Chris is going to do a great job of going into some of the detailed aspects, not really, I guess, detailed, but just some key aspects of what that cyber insurance policies you're going to want to have, because not all policies, right, Chris, are created equal.
Definitely.
So patching and updates and antivirus. So if we went back in time, like maybe 5 or 10 years, this would really be the minimum bar that you would want to operate. This is, if you were doing this, you were safe, right? But that ship has sailed. That is no longer the case. So just having patching and what I hear some people say is, well, we turn Windows Update on, it runs automatically. Well, let me ask you this. Run a report to find out what the patch level is of your organization. If you can't answer that question, you're doing it wrong. So you need to be able to know what the patch level health of your organization is. Someone must be presenting that information to you because you could have several machines that just aren't being patched. And if it happens to line up correctly with someone who isn't very savvy with their surfing habits or the way that they click on emails, you can have a huge disaster on your hands. Now, it just takes one failure on your part security-wise for it to be a success for the bad actor. So they only need one shot for it to work. You have to have a perfect score to be safe, which is kind of unfair. So we're going to cover some other aspects as well about how if there is a breach happens, what do you do? So patching third-party updates is also important. So that means more than just Windows patching. They're going after things like Adobe PDF. I mean, you guys use Adobe all the time, right? Chris, I'm sure your organization uses PDFs constantly, right?
All the time. I mean, delivering policies and things like that, it's constant.
Yeah, so they know you're going to have software like that installed in your machine. So they're going to attack that too. So you need to have a patching policy that isn't just Windows driven. It needs to leverage other products that they are going to attack if you happen to click on a link, okay? So it's all about giving you the best fighting chance. So also you want to have managed antivirus. So that means antivirus that's being monitored 24/7 on any potential issues that it may have, okay? So those are the baseline that you need to have, but you need to have more than just that. Okay, you need to have intrusion detection software, and that's a very broad topic. Okay, so I'm not going to go into specific details of those different types of intrusion detection software, but I'm just going to touch on it briefly to say why you need this. Okay, so what I mean by that is you need to know if something gets past your antivirus and your patching system. Because what the hacker is going to try to do is they're going to try to stay resident. In other words, if you reboot your computer, it needs to still stay infected. So they're going to try to stay resident on your machine, and they're going to try to report back to command and control so that they can start carrying out their attack or gathering critical information that they can sell or leverage later. This type of software will detect it trying to stay resident or it trying to communicate to command and control, and will try to shut down. There's various different products out there that accomplish that, and your security provider should have something in your network accomplishing this task. If you don't, that is a critical piece that you're open to. Now, we have seen just recently, Microsoft has had an exploit for their Microsoft Exchange servers, and it has been spreading rapidly. The patch has come out, but they're still having exploits happen because people just aren't patching and doing those updates. But what happened was, when it first came out, it was called a zero-day exploit. In other words, there were no patches that were in existence to prevent that breach from happening. This type of software would still report and detect this suspicious activity. So you see where I'm saying, Chris, how this can kind of be really important, because it's very easy and possible for hackers to get past that. So you need to see something to report. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely.
So
it's amazing how you can keep this ever changing and find the new ways that they're trying to access the system. That's amazing.
So you really need to have some type of software that if they get past your AV, if they get past your patching and your third-party updates, and they start reporting back and they're trying to move laterally, something needs to catch it and determine that you need attention immediately to this situation. Okay, so the next piece is really important, is content filtering and web protection. So what this is doing is, when your user is in your office and they decide to start surfing and going to websites that you feel are not work related, you should be able to stop or prevent that from happening. But also, you need to be able to stop them from accidentally clicking a link that could go to an infected site. But what a lot of times people do is they leverage their firewall to accomplish that task. And that, in my opinion, is good, but a better solution would be an agent-based version of that, so that when your users that have laptops leave your organization will still get that coverage. You don't want to only have that type of protection inside your organization, and that would limit your capabilities of keeping your people safe, because you don't want them to leave the organization and click some link, go to the website, get infected, and then bring that joy back into the building when they come back in and plug in the network. Because these bad actors are constantly scanning and looking for opportunities, because they're very opportunistic. They want to grab as much data as they can get in your organization, encrypt it as much as they can. And now something that they're starting to leverage, where I see the insurance policy really becoming a huge asset, is they're ransoming, putting your information out publicly. And so you need to have that insurance policy to help pay or do whatever that may need to prevent that from happening, sadly. We've never had that happen with any of our clients, but we've heard tons of nightmares, and then organizations that didn't have insurance policies to cover that, they were really up a creek.
That's a great point. Definitely, you want to take care of that right away. And this is where the adjusters are very specifically trained. When a claim comes in, they can really detect some of this stuff and help you get out ahead of it, because that's all they're specifically trained for. So the adjusters in this example can be a huge help as well.
So true. And you definitely don't want somebody who's cutting corners. You want somebody that's going to make your life easy through this terrible process that's going to eventually have to unfold in your organization, and can be very impactful. So you want someone that's going to partner with you in that process, alleviating as much as possible. And I think Chris and their team are great at that. So spam spear phishing. Have you ever heard of that, Chris? Spam and spear phishing? I'm sure you have.
Yes, definitely, for sure.
So this is attacks that you see that happen on a regular basis, and you say, oh, we've heard about this. They're really good at it. They are very good at sending those carefully crafted emails. I was at a conference in Phoenix last week, and while I was in there and we were talking about security protection, I literally got an email through my contact us page on our website, and it was beautifully crafted. They wrote it in such a way that, you really wanted to click the link. And here's the tactic they used. What they did is they said, hey, we see that you have copy protected material on your website. Here's this document that has a list of what they are. Click this so that we can have further discussion, because those are my photos and I don't want to take legal action against you. What do you think about that one, Chris? That's a pretty good one, huh?
That's pretty creative. Yeah, that is very creative.
It's intimidating.
It is, yeah. And we've also seen where they send an email that says, "Hey, you're behind on this invoice. You need to pay it." Now, what they have done is they've hacked a company that you already know, and they're sending that invoice from someone you trust. And they may be sending it from the accounts payable department. So it's coming from someone you would expect. And you're like, psh. And everybody kind of gets their dander up. I don't owe anything. And they click that link and boom, they got you. Okay.
Right. And it's amazing, they'll copy the logos and the fonts and everything like that. I mean, it's scary because they can be so very good on, how they present it.
And that is so true. So that's why that layered approach is so important. So when you do click the link, you're going to have the antivirus that's going to try to stop that content from happening. You're going to have the intrusion detection software that's going to see if they do get through. You're going to have the link redirection or blocking that's going to try to stop that information, that if you do try to attempt to go to that site, it's going to shut it down. So there is so many different ways with that layer to help stop in that moment of weakness from being capitalized. And that is the key. You have to have that layer, because there's no one thing that's going to stop that from happening. But the chance of having all of them fail at the same time is pretty small. It is still possible, but very small. And that kind of takes us to another aspect that I think gets neglected a lot, and that's password management. So I want to throw this out to the group, and Kaylee, stop me if we're having any questions. But throw this out to the group, that how many of you use very common passwords? Now, I'm not saying common as far as in less secure, but common across lots of different platforms. So are you using passwords that may be a few variations, but the same across Facebook, LinkedIn, your email, maybe even your login to your work? I mean, a lot of people do that. It's pretty common, especially when you start thinking that you have to have passwords that are complex, right? That's going to have a number, uppercase, lowercase, and a special character like a exclamation or pound sign. Those things are hard to remember. And when you start saying to yourself, well, I need to have unique passwords across all of those different platforms, it's pretty daunting. So what do people do? They just don't have different passwords. So they figure, if I just have a nuclear launch code type password that is really long, I'm safe. That is incorrect. What you have done is created a skeleton key that can unlock all the doors. So what the hackers have to do is they just have to breach one of those websites that you have your nuclear launch code type password on, and now they will try it across all of those. They have algorithms that once they have breached, like LinkedIn, which has happened, and Fitbit or MyFitnessApp or whatever application, once they breach that, they will grab all those passwords, and then they will start spinning through your Honors account. They'll try your Amazon. They are going to try every password, or every website with that password, and they'll even try some combinations and variants of it, hoping that they can get in as you, and they'll just move laterally across your profile and get to as many platforms as they can. So what does that mean? That means you need to have different passwords for each one. So that means you need a password management software, because a notepad isn't going to get it done, right? Having it on your keyboard is not safe. I used to, in one of the security presentation, I used to have showed a picture of this guy that had on his social media, he took a picture of himself, and on his screen was his password. And when he posted it on social media, people just like zoomed in and they could see what his password was. So that was a pretty big no-no. So you need to have password. Go ahead, Chris.
No, so sticky notes don't cut it anymore, right?
No, it's definitely not. So you need to have password management software. There's lots of different products out there. I won't go into the details of what they are, but a lot of them are very good, and they allow you to create random passwords that are more complex, and then you can do that across the different sites and then keep yourself safe. So then what is nice about that is you're able to, if one of those sites gets breached, your exposure is very limited. So the last slide for me is going to be planning for breach. So, you may have detected we've had almost a defeatist attitude towards the fact that a breach may occur. And we do this on purpose because if we have the attitude of our plan is to prevent it from happening and that's as far as we go, we've failed you. And it's quite frankly just the wrong approach. You must plan on a breach happening. If you haven't, you have set yourself up for failure, because if, for example, it does happen, you don't want to be trying to figure out how to address it on the fly at the same time you're trying to figure out the right way to address it. That's wrong. That's why when with our clients, when we're working on the backups for them, we plan for a breach to happen and how we can secure those backups, either off-site, which we always do, as well as sequestering the device that does the backups away from the network. So none of the passwords are shared across that device in the network. So if they were able to compromise it, they can't get into that device. So you have to plan. Think to yourself, in your organization, if you're an IT provider for your company, right? Maybe you work at your company and you're responsible for IT. You need to put the hat on for an hour or so and just think, if a breach happens, what could happen? What's my data that's important? How do I protect it? You need to put that hat on and live in a hacker's perspective for a period of time in your organization. What could they do? And I say this all the time, just because it's unimaginable does not mean it's not possible. And so you have to think about that so that you're taking care of your precious resources, your data, and keeping it safe and protected. So that means you need to think about who do I call, right? How fast do I call? Who do I get involved? Is there any legal organization that I need to report to that this breach has occurred? Is there, what type of documents do I need to follow to institute a remediation and response to this? So you should have a response process if a breach does occur, and you want to have that documented. You don't want to have a 50-page one. You want to have something that is brief and quick and exact to follow so that you know what to do, because you don't want to be trying to decide that. So, and I think also a big piece of that too is having a cybersecurity policy that you can invoke when that happens. So in that list that you're following to go through, you would want to contact someone like Chris, for example, to assist you in that situation where that breach has happened, because you don't want to just try to wing it on your own, especially if you've already paid for that policy. It's always important to invoke those when you need. So I'll pass this off to Chris. Next, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Bobby. And definitely, it's being able that first call. That's always in the insurance world. That a claim happens, and there's emotions and financial repercussions. Is what is that first call? And so with an agency, an independent agency that's experienced in it, we can really give you what's next. Here's what we do, what's next. And then that same thing with the adjusters. They can really help on giving you the game plan going forward. And just having that initial game plan is so critical, because it gives people a sense of security and peace of mind that there's a process, right? So that's what people are looking for in a claim, that there's a process. So definitely those are great points. And the first slide here, Bobby mentioned it earlier, but the cyber attacks are growing so fast, and not just the amount of them, but the dollar amounts and the claims amounts. You saw that chart earlier where the number of $1 million claims are growing exponentially in the last 3 to 4 years. So it's not just the amount of claims we're seeing, but the number of claims, or the amount of the claims are growing fast. And 30% of cyber insurance claims involve insiders, and people automatically think, inside crime, a disgruntled employee is hacking into the system and stealing money and records and so forth. But a lot of the claims that we see are unintentional. That we mentioned the phishing example, where an accountant gets an email that looks like an invoice to a vendor, and they pay that invoice. Well, that's not intentional, but it's coming from the inside. Or an employee forwards a email that has some links in it and so forth that they think it'd be helpful to the other people on their team inside the company. That's not intentional. They didn't know, but it still happens from the inside. Or a laptop getting stolen or left with sensitive information. Those all be insider situations. And half of cyber claims are from small businesses. You hear about the Targets of the world, the big national companies and so forth, but over half the claims that we see in the industry are from companies at 250 employees and less. So, just because you have 20, 30 employees, you're still could be a target for a cyber claim, because it depends on what you do, your exposure and so forth. So, and the cost of compromised records, geez, $220 per compromised records. I'll have an example of this later, but if you get let's say just 1,000 records, that's over $200,000 in claims cost or possible expense to you. Do you have that laying around to handle, to deal with? There's certain laws that you have to notify people and set up monitoring and so forth. So that dollar amount, expense amount per record compromised can go extremely high. And then
we've seen an increase on that, Chris.
What's that?
We've seen it going up. There's been more and more of an increase on Bitcoin ransoming, where they're saying they want more and more money. It's amazing how high it starts.
Right. And that's not counting the fraud that could happen on that record. That's just the notification in the monitoring and so forth that you have to do if it's exposed. So, and definitely, we mentioned this earlier, cyber insurance policies are not the same. There's a lot of different ones out there, depending on what you do as a business and what company that you offered. There's some that are endorsements, which is basically you can add it on to your current package policy. They serve a purpose. So you got to be careful with endorsements, because a lot of times they have a smaller amount, or there's some exclusions and limitations in there. But they're better than nothing, and they still come with a trained adjuster if there was a claim. So they're better than nothing. And then there's a standalone policy that you can really customize to your business, and you can create higher limits and different, third-party coverages and things like that with a standalone policy. So, the biggest thing we get in question is what type of policy is right for my business. And it depends on what you do. It depends on how much data you hold, or your systems and so forth. So it really depends. Is your business a high target risk? Are you a medical office with sensitive information that is valuable on the dark web market? Do you store data? If you do, what type? Are you a CPA? You have a bunch of financial information, social security numbers, and P&Ls of companies. So that can be valuable to hackers. And then credit card information, you may not think you store those, but for example, a simple situation where a common company like a lawn care or pest control company that has a reoccurring billing, there's credit card, information in their system somewhere that can be accessed. So restaurants with credit card machines, even though you're not storing them, they could get hacked into your system and grab that. So there's policies that will pay for those examples. So, and that leads me into the next slide. This is where I was explaining. I wanted to show some real examples. I think it resonates with people when you tell the story. You tell real examples. We know insurance, company policies and language can be very, very daunting, and totally different. Insurance jargon can sound like a different language sometimes. So. Here's 4 examples that I want to go over with you. And the first one is network information security and liability. So a hacker gets into your system, they get sensitive information and records, and you're sued. So there's a breach, you're sued, now what? A lot of times we see in the industry, there may not be fraud or theft on those records, but when you're sued, the defense costs can be immense. Lawyers are not cheap. We all know that. So a lot of people underestimate the cost of the defense when it comes to records that are exposed. And in the policy, you can get policies that will pay for that. The next one is security breach remediation notification expense. This is more of a common one you hear with Target. They have a lot of the breached information. There's compromised records out there. So the policy will pay for notification costs. You got to notify the people in a timely manner. Sometimes you have to set up credit monitoring, sometimes up to a year. I mean, think about the cost of credit, monitoring credit up to a year on someone. And then actual reimbursement for fraud if something happens and, with those records. So that's that part of the policy that would pay for those. The next one, business interruption and additional expense. So a hacker gets into your system and it's infected and your computer system is down and you're losing money, you're losing income, you're losing profit. And how many businesses out there can function and go without their system? I'll hand it to Bobby because I know he has a real life example on this next one. But
yeah,
one example that what we don't realize, I insure a lot of contractors, and like for a general contractor that has deadlines that they have to meet in their certain parts of the construction process. If those deadlines aren't met because you're down, that can be thousands and tens of thousands of dollars a day and week. So that's something people don't realize. And Bobby, you mentioned before you had a example of this in the situation.
Yeah, we had a situation where we had to assist a client. They were a vendor, and they had a breach that occurred to them, but they didn't have cyber insurance to assist them to remediate those issues. So, it got kind of dicey. So we were trying to do our best to assist them. We got brought in to help them and get back up and running again. But the reality is, if you have a cyber insurance, they would be able to pay for any type of situations that you have to be compliant on. Maybe you're doing a government contract, and the government contract says that if you have a breach, you have to do X, Y, Z in order for you to have access back to that organization again. So having the right insurance could help you in that situation, make sure that you're able to remediate those things so that you can get access back to that contract that might be really important for you. And if you don't have insurance that covers those types of things, you could be really exposed.
Definitely, that's a great example. People don't realize the vendors and the supply chains and things like that might be affected by a breach. An additional expense, hiring a firm like Bobby's to help, get the vendor back on track. Those are different additional expenses. Or, if you have to input data afterwards, if there's systems that are records lost and you have to pay somebody to input data back in, those can be paid.
And Chris, also what we have seen too is, let's say you have a good cybersecurity, right? You're doing everything right, and you can still do everything 100% right and still have a breach. So just because you've crossed the T's and dotted the I's doesn't mean you don't have that. And let's say that you've got great backups, right? And the ransom that they've done to you doesn't matter. You're able to get all the data back very quickly, and so you're able to get back and functioning. But what they're starting to do now is they are actually saying, look, we're going to put your data, your precious data, out on the web, and if you don't pay us, it's going to hurt. And we've even seen where these hackers for larger organizations, there was a hospital that had this happen. They breached them, and then they hacked somebody else's Facebook account and then bought ads that appeared for that hospital, talking about how they had specifically been breached and how they would put their data out there if they don't pay. So they were harassing the victim to make them pay that data, because the company did have restoration capability. So they said, forget it. I don't need it. But then they started threatening them. They were going to put the data out there. So that's the other thing that they're doing now. That's where having that insurance is really critical, because you may still have to pay even though you've done everything right.
Right.
And that could be massive cost. We've seen a ransom dollar amounts for small businesses for $250,000 is what they're saying they were going to have to pay. It's nuts.
No, it is. It's astonishing how they can turn it around on the business. And this is where I mentioned before, the adjusters, they are so specifically trained. Instead of just having a regular property adjuster on your claim, you have someone that's specifically trained how to deal with those situations, how to handle the ransom, how to handle what to look for, how to negotiate, and so forth. So those adjusters, we're as an agent, we're on the front lines and providing the different policies and so forth. But those adjusters that are specifically trained by the company, they're critical in moving it forward and getting it resolved. And a lot of times they can help you with vendors too, because they can outline the plan and here's the resources behind this company and we're helping them. So that definitely the adjusters can come into play tremendously in this situation. The next one is the computer fraud. This is more example of the phishing email that you mentioned earlier. So they send an invoice and you think you're paying a regular good invoice and you send money to a criminal instead of vendor. And so that money that's lost, they pay for that reimbursement. And also because they look so real sometimes, those invoices can look so real and those emails can be so good that it's like, again, it's a most of the time it's unintentional. But, and then, they're along with the invoices, your accounting software. So if they get into your accounting software, you might have third-party software versus your bank software that's not quite as protected. So they can get into that, and then you have the financial information and so forth. So the securities and the money that would be lost, the policy would pay for that. I hope this helps with the examples. That insurance language can be very confusing. So hopefully these examples help. It's just the tip of the iceberg. There's several more different types of policies and different claims that can happen, but these four are some of the main ones that we see. And so
and Chris, something that concerns me is sometimes people take the approach for this insurance like they do with backups. They say, well, we got backups. And I'll ask, well, how long does it take for you to get your backups restored? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, well,
right?
That's a big deal. Like, it could take a day to do the restoration. Is that acceptable for your organization to be down? So just because you say I have backups does not mean, and maybe those backups are good, but maybe that might not be good for you. And it hurts me when I hear people, and I've had this conversations with clients. Do you have cyber insurance? And they say yes. And I'm like, what are some questions that maybe I could ask my clients to kind of probe them without being too invasive to get like a better feel of their coverage?
Right. You could say, do you know what type of situations it would cover? Do you know your limits? Do you know if there's any exclusions? Do you know if it's a company that is trained and specializes in that? So you say, you might ask if you have cyber insurance, they might think that, oh, my credit card company or my vendors have that, so I'm protected. Well, they may, but that's a separate third party from your business. So are you kind of taking a chance if a credit card vendor says, oh yeah, we have that cyber insurance, we'll protect you. Well, maybe, but they're going to protect themselves first versus your business. So you want to have that first party policy that you can control and have a relationship with the adjusters and so forth going forward. So definitely and we can send out some information with the type of questions and scenarios that you can send to your clients to better get a feel for what they need.
Good. Well, I'm going to kick it over to the question and answer section so we can allow people to have the opportunity to have any open dialogue with us that they may want to have.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to click over to the Q&A box and ask any of those, and I'll be looking out for that. But I did want to also say that I put in the chat both the Holmes organization and Axiom's websites, so you can go there and check them out as well if you're interested. And if you guys have any questions at all, feel free to shoot me an email, or if it's okay with them, I can shoot their emails in the chat as well if you guys have any questions for them specifically. And if you're interested, let's say in that layered approach to security, or you have some more questions about cyber insurance and stuff like that. But
and let me put out there too, Kaylee, that you may be not even interested in interfacing with our organization, which is perfectly fine. You may be the head person, you may be an IT expert, or you may be a hired IT gun at that company and you just want some better clarity on some of the things that we were talking about, I would love to have a conversation with you, talk about any way that I can help you shore up, because really we're kind of all in this together. We really do want to secure the borders and try to help protect Jacksonville as best we can. And anyone else out there who needs some assistance trying to accomplish that, I am an open book to try to help discuss those things because it just helps everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
definitely. And I did at that point, Bobby, we're, even if you don't work with us, we have some expertise as agencies can point you in the right direction and tell you, some policies, some companies are good and bad. And so we're definitely open to help you and questions and so forth. So for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, and also I know we'll probably be posting some of this in snippets on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll also see all of this information in the chat down below, the description below, so you guys can check all this stuff out as well. We are not going to leave you hanging. We've got your back as well. Yeah, so it doesn't seem like I have any questions right now. So I do just want to close with saying again, Bobby and Chris, thank you so much for being able to present and share your wisdom and your expertise, and even the examples that you had that are really helpful to understand how important all of these things are in this layered approach to security. So we thank you guys so much for hopping on here and listening, and stay tuned because we will be posting some of these snippets again, like I said, on our YouTube channel, which is under axiom.tech if you search on YouTube. So you guys can feel free to go back and check out these clips later on if you have any questions.
Well, and I'm sure that the homes may be posting it on social media as well. So.
Definitely. Yep. We'll be sharing it. So.
Perfect. Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on this morning chat that we had, and we hope to see you again on the next one. Hopefully, coming up soon, we'll have another webinar. So.
Yeah, that's a good intro because we do want to. This was really talking about the holes, and the next presentation that we'll be doing will be focusing on how they're actually going in and exploiting those holes specifically, and techniques and tricks so that you can kind of help identify that. So kind of like forewarned is forearmed. So that will be probably one of the next webinars we'll be doing very soon, and should be very effective and help train your users realize that, because I think one of the best antivirus is the people sitting in the chair. If you can get them armed and warned about the different tactics that they're leveraging and coming after your organization, and understanding how they're going at you, will help you better assess and see and realize what they're trying to do to your company.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share. And I think the next one would be good for us to drill down more into, what affects the, pricing and type of coverages and exposures and the policies, get more down more in the weeds of what to expect, how to go about starting, searching for the good cyber policy that's right for you.
Yeah.
And we can definitely go over some of those more initial details.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys again so much for hopping on, and we hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much. Bye.
You too. Thank you.